So as we're recording this and we're nearing the end of 2025, if you've been reading the news when it comes to AI, you'd be forgiven for thinking we're in that famous trough of disillusionment when it comes to AI. Gartner themselves, the people who created the idea of the trough of disillusionment, the hype cycle, themselves have predict that over 40% of agentic AI projects are likely to be cancelled in the coming years due to escalating costs, unclear business value, or inadequate risk controls. But the bulls would reply, the people positive towards AI, that there's nothing to worry about. Every technology goes through it. You've just got to choose your battles. The challenge then becomes finding low-hanging fruit opportunities where AI can add value quickly and cost-effectively. Hey there and welcome to the AI Forecast. I'm your host, Paul Muller. Join me along with leading companies and industry experts as we explore the past, the present and the future of data and AI in the enterprise every week, proudly brought to you by Cloudera. Today's guest is Lund, co-founder of Templafy, and he believes that document workflows might just be the low-hanging fruit that AI can benefit from the most. Welcome, Christian.
Thank you so much.
It's great to have you here. Hey, before we jump into, I guess, the topic of AI project success or failure and trying to find areas where AI can add predictable, repeatable value for the majority of us, we do a little thing at the beginning of every show we call the Fast Four. Chance to get to know you a little differently. You ready to play?
Bring it on.
He's smiling. He's looking worried. All right. First up, what would people who know you best, Christian, say is your superpower?
It's probably for good and bad that I sometimes see things before they happen. So that's good for business sometimes when you can sick when others sack, but it also has its disadvantages.
I'm curious what the disadvantage might be.
With my kids, for example, when I'm moving the glass that is a little bit too close to the edge of the table, and my youngest is like, it's not gonna fall, and I always do it anyway. So it kind of gets you into these type of.
Oh, I like that. All right. Next up, what would you say is the most impactful technology of all time?
I'll probably go with electricity because it's pretty defining for the era that we're in now as well. Just a long, long time ago. That's pretty impactful if it's a technology.
Yeah, no, I'll take it as a technology. I think, well, certainly the production of it is. So I like that one a lot. All right. We talk about AI for business. We're going to talk about AI with document workflows, for example, today. But Christian, what would you like to see AI automate for you personally in your future? Forget about business.
Forget about business, because I was about to think like knowledge and knowledge work.
Yeah, go for it if you want to. I'm curious.
Yeah. That's the first thing that came to mind in terms of what AI would do and where I think it's going to be incredibly impactful is actually knowledge work. So it's the whole sort of white collar world that's been sitting on the throne for a long, long time, and that's going to change pretty dramatically, and that the whole role of knowledge workers is going to be very different, and that includes myself because I'm one. So all of the stuff that I think could be better performed by AI should be, and I'll have to change my role into be probably more in the director's chair a little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting. I saw I was reading a book recently that talked about the idea that we've gone from, sort of the effort economy, right? The sort of the physical doing of things to the knowledge economy, and now to the sort of invention or idea economy, which is different from the knowledge economy, right? The idea that you need to know things, knowing things without being able to ideate and assemble things in different ways is kind of useless in some respects. So execution to knowledge to ideation, I think, is an interesting one. So agree with you. We're definitely, the knowledge worker is, I won't say under attack, but it's there's certainly a massive disruption taking place.
Mm-hmm.
Last but not least, you're someone who works with data every day. You've got a background in obviously in the document side of things, but also in marketing and executive management. What are some of the best practices that you've learned as someone who deals with data every day?
I would say the best practices, or some of the learnings, comes from like not knowing how to deal with it, and this whole notion that has really come into AI as well so strongly of this garbage in, garbage out type of thing. So I would say hygiene is extremely important on that, and when that works well, it's when the hygiene is good, and the second thing I would say is when you have a purpose with it. what are you trying to do with it? So other thing that I think is super strong for you as well is like context. Context is king, and the way that you use data has to be sort of put into the right context for it to sort of bring anything. You then extrapolate that into some of the discussions that I think we'll be having today on how to use that around AI. It's even more important because otherwise it's not really going to work, at least for now.
You know, in the year and a bit we've been recording this podcast, the topic of hygiene comes up a lot, but I kind of get the sense that it's an aspirational goal rather than an achieved goal for people. And I feel as though one of the things I'd like to explore on the podcast moving forward is why is it that we keep talking about it, but it's so hard to accomplish? Is it a human factor problem? Is it just the nature of the problem and it's never going to go away? But it does seem to be a perennial one. But I love the idea of purpose and context as well. It's the first time I've heard that. And I think that a lot of us are collecting data. Maybe this is part of the hygiene problem. We're collecting data because we can, but haven't necessarily worked out what we're going to do with it.
Exactly.
Let's jump into it. First and foremost, take us a bit through your background. You've got an interesting career arc.
For myself, out of school, I studied political science for reasons that I forgot. And then quickly after that transitioned into business and was working in sales and consulting for a while as a strategy consultant too. And then for the past 20-something years, I've been sort of self-employed and building businesses. And more recently as well, have also been investing in businesses and helping other businesses get off the ground and move forward. So that's been my life, and everything about that has been around technology. So again, pretty big distance from political science into this. At the end, the dots, I guess, do connect somehow, but at least that's what I've been doing.
I like that. You know, we should have diverse backgrounds. I think it leads to more interesting people. Well, let's first talk about, I guess, the AI. I don't know if we should call it the AI bubble. I think that's obviously a bit of sensationalist hype, but we're definitely seeing a classic Gartner hype curve playing out in the sense of AI is going to fix everything. Every company went and redid their URLs to have .ai on the end of them, and you know we've seen it's kind of like the 1999 .com boom all over again. I mean, I lived through that. We are now starting to see those. You know, the MIT report famously came out a couple of weeks ago. A lot of people talking about that 95% of projects failing to deliver any value at all to the business, and this most recent Gartner prediction that, you know, the vast majority of AI projects are likely to be cancelled in the next couple of years because they're not delivering value. I suppose my question is, you know, A, do you agree with that sentiment? And B, what's your hypothesis on why the doomsayers are now starting to come out and say, well, you know, getting value from this stuff is more difficult than just saying you've got an AI project in your annual report and hoping for the best?
First question, do I agree with that? Absolutely. I think it's becoming very evident that we're past the being impressed phase. I mean, AI has been around for a very long time, but for, I would say, normal people like myself, more recently, it's really come into something that I see every day. And the first thing that happened was being like super impressed, especially impressed with one axis, which was speed. Unbelievable how fast things can happen. And then, I think one of the problems that sits within this is that the other axis has been missing a little bit. Speed is one thing, but typically you need quality as well, at least, to get to some outputs that you can actually use for anything. And if it is supposed to deliver value or even replace some of the work that otherwise was done by human, you kind of need to have at least those two axes. In our world where we come from, delivering outputs in business documents, that is definitely one thing. If you rely on those to deliver a value and sort of as a vehicle to deliver information that turns into value for your customers, quality is a very important axis. And that has been, I think, a very, very big, it took a while for the world to realize that. And a lot of the projects that have been spun up in across businesses to do these things have really been explorative without sufficient, I would say, purpose, and also thinking about what is it that we're trying to achieve and what is it actually that are the requirements, the capabilities almost that are required for us to get to where we need to be. And the other axis was missing always, and now it's coming up. So I don't think we're on the wrong path with AI, but I definitely understand why a lot of the projects that are now going on in the world are not going to be successful.
The idea of quality, Ray Wong from Constellation Research, I don't know how familiar you are with Ray's work, but he talked about, actually was on, I think, the second episode of this show, or first even, he talked about the idea of precision AI. AI, when you're doing photo editing, doesn't need to be particularly precise. And if you get it wrong, the harm's pretty minimal. If you are talking about, well, I guess maybe let's talk about document management. If you misroute a document, you could create legal problems for yourself. You could incur additional work. You may wind up misplacing people's money. I mean, there's a million things that could go wrong where precision counts and you're dealing with critical issues. Quality, to your point, isn't really optional, right? It's got to be part of the bedrock of what you're doing.
Yeah.
But when we're dealing with AI, we are dealing ultimately, and I'm going to simplify things here, with a sort of a statistical model. It's never, it is by its nature a little fuzzy. Do you think that it's possible to have quality or precision and get the benefits of the sort of less prescriptive, less programmatic approach that AI gives us?
Yes, I definitely do. It's definitely possible. It's possible already now, but you need to be sort of very upfront on what you're trying to achieve with it and which tasks you give it. I'll give you an example from our
Please.
world. If you want to use AI for compiling and building out a business document, for example, there is a difference on how you would be using AI. If we take agents, for example, you can have an agent where you kind of give it a prompt and the agent does everything, like pulling out the full deck and creating everything for you. Where based on a prompt and maybe some instructions that the agent have, you kind of rely on it doing everything. Then you can take it to the next step where the agent is kind of narrowed down to only taking care of specific slides where it has an expertise to, or even further where it's a specific area within a slide that it's supposed to do its work within. And obviously, as you go down that path, where you sort of narrow in, similar to what you do, by the way, in a normal world working with people. If you ask like one random person at the coffee counter, could you do all this for me with a little bit of instructions, versus that you actually build out a project and you have experts doing different things and doing different work. There's a big difference in terms of the precision, to use your word, on how you actually, or the accuracy that you get on the output on the other side. So it's actually quite simple. But what that then requires is on the back end that you would need to have something that orchestrates this. You need to have another type of control than just a user given a prompt and hoping for the best. So there's an extra sort of piece of work to do, especially from the business side, to make sure that you actually are sure that that what's actually being performed will actually be done from a best practice point of view. And that's where a lot of technologies struggle, a lot of businesses struggle to get to that level where they have that sort of level of control about that digital work, around that digital workforce, that is similar to what they have with their real life workforce.
I really appreciate you saying that, because one of the things that one of my mantras recently has been, as AI technologies begin to resemble humans more and more, I think where some of the misset expectations are is that we forget that humans, to your point, need a high degree of specificity if they're going to do their jobs well. And we kind of treat AI like digital dishwashers. I remember when I got my first dishwasher and I thought you just threw all the dishes in dirty, caked with stuff, and they would just magically come out clean. And of course, after a couple of iterations of that, you realize you kind of need to wash the dishes before they go in the dishwasher, or it doesn't do its job properly. Does the analogy make sense to you?
Yeah, exactly. Yes. What I would say is, again, that I think the companies that are most successful, at least using AI around enterprises, are actually the ones that are viewing AI as sort of very close to real world people. So they're replicating the real world versus what you would be doing in like classic automation, where there's a lot of rules and you set up structures for a certain binding in a document, looking for data in a certain place, which is completely different. Here with AI, you're actually replicating what would be the requirements if this was to be built out without any technology at all, just classic world, just with people. What would be the process, and how can that be replicated by using AI, and especially AI agents with a certain level of orchestration that essentially replicates real world? Tons of examples outside of just like generating business documents like we do. that are kind of similar. Once you start doing that and you make sure you don't forget the orchestration layer from a business perspective to really have a lot of control in that part, that's when you can get to this sort of new world where best practice is worst case, that you're actually never worse off than best practice, because you find and identify these best practices that you can then start replicating, which is the difference, by the way, between old world with real people and then AI, because they never run out of steam, right? They have unlimited capacity.
Yes, and that is, I think, a beautiful example of the differences. Of course, you can just keep that going. Let's talk a little bit about where the low hanging fruit is, because if we're going to get benefit from this stuff, and especially if we're going to get, I'll go into some hyperbole here. If we're not going to get fired for spending a bunch of company money and not achieving results, right? If we're not going to have the shareholders screaming at us going, what do you mean we spent all this money and AI is doing nothing for us? As I mentioned, I think, picking the low hanging fruit, picking some really nice juicy targets that are going to yield maybe not flashy benefits, but they're going to yield benefits measured in dollars, measured in customer outcomes, measured in employee satisfaction. The art is in choosing the problem, I think, to your point, right? You said before, the purpose. When I think of AI in the business context, I suppose, like a lot of people, the first two things that come to mind are irritating chatbots on websites, which just have to say drive me. They're as bad as those old button pressing IVRs we used to get. I personally find them not much fun to deal with. But, that's that sort of notion of an online help agent. And the other is the apocryphal Archimedes eureka moment where we apply AI to all of our corporate data and it suddenly reveals the strategic opportunity we were missing all along, right? The idea that somehow AI is going to see something in our company's data that we couldn't. And those sort of tend to be, the two sort of extremes. But you've got a view that there's this huge pool of work in areas like workflows and document creation that is just low-hanging fruit for business they could be going for. Now, obviously, you have a horse in this race, so you wouldn't have started the company if you didn't believe in it. But tell me why you think that's got such a big opportunity for impact.
The simple answer, and it's not something we're saying, like tons of research kind of prove that. One from McKinsey, for example, it's a little more than half your day if you're a knowledge worker that actually goes into content creation at a sort of a bigger scale, not just document, but content creation or content reviewing. So, which is massive. So it's half your day, every day, always, that goes into that area. Plus, it's an area where a lot of the execution underneath is actually something that does not provide a lot of value because you do it, and that's really the problem. So, as a business document, for example, it serves incredibly well as a canvas where you can put in information that you can use as a vehicle to deliver information to the next person that needs to receive this. So the document plays a very important role. They need to be there. And document also meaning that could also be websites or other, but you need that canvas to do it. The compilation of it, however, it comes from what the user is trying to do. So I have an intent where I need to put this together to get you over here. But the actual compilation of it, starting from one thing that AI is really good at, like having the ability to overview massive, vast areas of data, and also actually the other piece to distill that incredibly quick, and also to contextualize it as long as it has the right direction for it. It is something that AI is really good at. So specifically for generating documents, which is about distilling a lot of information and putting it into a new canvas that can then convey a message to a recipient on the other side, is something that happens constantly, to say the least. But a lot of the work that goes into actually putting that together is something that another person than a human can do, because it actually sits very well with some of the capabilities that AI actually has, as long as the direction given is strong enough. And that's where we need the human. I have an intent. I know what I'm going to use it for. So as long as the purpose is clean enough, there is a lot of opportunity to have AI doing a lot of the work in between, finding all the data, distilling it down to something, combining it with other data, actually at the end of the day, piecing it together on a business document, having you review it, helping users iterate over it, and then get done. So it can do a lot of the stuff that otherwise people will have to do. And that's why there's a ton of opportunity in that particular use case, the way that we see it, and our customers.
Yeah, so that sounds good. Can you give me an example or two of what a day in the life might look like before and after I apply AI to the sort of document creation workflow process?
I'll tell you sort of the simple process that actually sits within enterprise. Something is not new. Like, I have an intent from a user, I need to build out a business document. But then to do it, I need to do simple things like finding the right template that would support me in that. Next step, finding all the content and data that is actually required to be putting on that document. Then I, of course, need to compile it and put it together so that it's also compelling from a visual perspective. And ultimately, I would need to review it to make sure that the quality lives up to the standards that I have, which could include more people. That is just the process of generating business documents, which has been that way forever, right? And with each of these steps, that's kind of where it's always been possible, not always, but for the past many years, it's been possible to put in a lot of automation to that, where you could actually, because you probably want this template, and then you can answer to these gating questions with triggers like a logical process where things are being compiled for you on the back of configuration. But the negative has always been, like, it's difficult to find those use cases, and even if you did, you would have to put in a ton of work to configure that to actually be in a state where you'd be able to replicate it. Now, with AI, that's where it comes in super strong, because for each of these steps, ranging from, I now understand your intent. On the back of your intent, this is probably the starting point I'm going to give you with this template. But this is probably also the model I'm going to send you to, which would be the best suited for what you're trying to do. Oh, and by the way, since this is what you're doing, I might ground the information that we're putting together in this document in best practices that we have available in these system of records that we have. And on the back of that, I'm going to compile it because I know better, or I have a friend, like an agent friend, that is really good at compiling decks or documents for you to the best practice. And then ultimately, the review process is actually minimized because it's already pretty good. So with each of these steps, we're just replicating what the best person in the company would be able to do at each of those steps. And since it's a process, as I said, that just happens over and over and over and over again with billions of documents across the world every day, it's a good place to look, where you find like pretty low practical, but pretty substantial gains to have, both on saving time, reducing risk, obviously, but also making money, because you can ground these in best practices and get faster to something that actually works.
One of the, I think, other inhibitors to an AI project success, in my opinion, and to a certain extent my experience, is the idea of overcoming the change obstacle, right? Is every time, it's the human factors thing. We introduce a new technology, people need to change their behaviors, and it creates a friction, especially where habits have already formed in other ways. What have you learnt about streamlining some of the adoption of these tools to make it feel natural and habit forming, rather than people going, oh, I've got to go to a whole new place to use these new technologies? How do you integrate it into the way they're already using their tools?
You're spot on. And actually, this is not new. Also from other technologies that you want to drive adoption to, because people are just very much into habits. What I did yesterday, I'm just going to continue to do unless there's a really good reason that it changes. So oftentimes it's easier to not change that and just stay with it. So the short answer is, I think, again, both for us and for others that have been successful around this, is to make sure you are where work already gets done. So for us, creating business documents, that would be directly inside of the application. So it feels like it's what you're doing anyway. All of a sudden, it's just right there. It happens right there within PowerPoint or Word or similar tools in Google. But it's also when you go across sort of your workflow systems. If you're a seller, you spend half your day inside of your CRM system. That's where these things should automatically be embedded, and oftentimes without you even needing to interact with them. So one example could be, I'm a seller, I change stage on my opportunity to the next stage, and then that automatically trigger a process where I need new documentation. I need new set of documents for that next phase of my sales cycle. And those are automatically created just because I changed the stage. the agents sort of kick in and they do their work on the back of that. So it's as much as you can to really just blend into those existing workflows that people are doing already and are very used to. That is by far the easiest way to get going versus requiring to people, now we have a shiny new tool, but you need to move away from what you do and go to this website. And now you can start chatting and do stuff. Just that barrier alone, you can have the best product in the world, and it's going to be super difficult to have people do it by the end of the day.
Yeah, that is the difficulty, is just getting people to change their habits and lowering that barrier to entry, making it feel familiar.
Yeah.
I suppose if I think about my own experience with using AI every day, where I'm using it the most is where it's been embedded into workflows I already know. It's almost seamless, right? Now let's talk about the topic. We talked at the beginning a little bit about precision, quality, and trust. It isn't a word that sorry, I should maybe restate that. It is a word that gets bandied around a lot, but trust is one of those, it's almost an indefinable quality as well, right? Is that you kind of either trust the output or you don't. And it only takes a couple of bad experiences where, you get a hallucination or something goes wildly wrong and it's buried somewhere deep in a document, and suddenly you're like, you know what, this is a great tool, but if it starts swearing halfway through the document or doing something really strange, starts making up mathematics that doesn't actually follow the laws of maths, and I'm a bit nervous about using this tool, and obviously that's amplified where, as I said, where money's at stake, people's lives are at stake if it's a legal document, for example. So how do you, in your opinion, this is partly an expectation setting problem, I think, but how do you balance sort of the idea of automation and speed and freeing up a whole bunch of time for those people who are doing a lot of document creation with the idea that they might have an extreme need for accuracy, compliance, for ensuring that they, to your point about templates, that they're brand compliant. Is it a matter of picking the right use case for the job or setting the right rules in place? How do you deal with that?
It starts with understanding the use case, actually, because the way to, I would say, apply capabilities is by understanding what you're trying to do with it. And I would even argue there are areas where AI might not be the best, at least on its own. And those could be those very high precision type of documents, speaking from our world, where you have all the known knowns. You know exactly what needs to go in all those places, and there is just one sort of option for it. So there is no optionality for doing any type of elaboration of any kind, and definitely not hallucination. So for those types of documents, you just maybe you don't want to use AI, or if you start doing it, then you start opening up where would this actually be very helpful? Where am I better off using AI versus something else? Which could, for example, be an area of a document where you are potentially allowed to be a little bit more elaborate. Give me the latest of what's going on in this market or has been going on in this market over the past 5 years, which is less precision, but still something that needs to provide some context to it. So you start looking at what is it actually you're trying to do, and where do you then apply AI, even with rules, saying that in this particular area, I want this model to work on the back of this sort of consolidated prompt to deliver this information or trigger this agent to do this work. Or other parts of the document where you don't use AI. It's just one-to-one strict data connectors. And then you work backwards. Once you get into, by far, the majority of documents that are being produced in companies, I would say the 85%, those are actually the ones that are less super precision heavy, like the one that I just mentioned, but the ones that actually are a little bit more elaborate. Like I need to create like a training deck for something that we're setting up in the company. So I would like the help to have that done, which is an area where AI can be super helpful. It's going to work on the back of a template. It might use like a model that the company allows their users to use. So it's not going to be part of a training regime that goes out into the outside world and all that. But it can still do its work to a pretty decent extent. Or other scenarios where you would say, well, my alternative is to start from nothing, or I have a template with nothing. I would rather go 20%, 30% down the road with a good starting point that I can then iterate over, which is also extremely helpful. And that's back to level setting the expectations. what are you trying to do? And one problem that I think AI has been having is that it's either or, because of how sort of the world has trained people to work with technology. If it's not perfect, I can't use it. And that's one thing where I think the world has a job to level set expectations a little bit better. You're still a lot better off. It's like if 8 million documents that you're producing every day, you can now reduce your time spending on them with 30%. That's pretty significant, right?
Yeah.
Even if you still have to do the rest of the work. And from there, you can then start identifying more and more stuff where you can be more and more specific with more specifically trained agents, or even with some of the more classic automation tools. But there's a ton of value once you start looking into what you actually can get from this, if the expectations are set correctly.
Yeah, and look, and again, I'll go back to the comment I made at the beginning. If I said to you, look, here's a really great intern who's studying business at university who can help you with document preparation, it would be unreasonable to expect that they're going to get everything perfect, but they might be able to help, they will be able to help you get, 2/3 of the job, half of the job, a third of the job, depending on the complexity, the novelty. They might be able to help you get 99% of it done.
Yes.
And then you're the human in the loop, for want of a better term, that checks their work, adjusts it, tweaks it, uses your experience, your judgment to finish the work. Have I got the analogy right?
I think you've got the analogy very right, because it starts out being like, you could argue, a junior consultant that could do things pretty well, but would have to be like, anything you throw at it, just do it and get me to those 30%. But the other thing that we've noticed that is actually quite interesting is that a lot of work that goes on in businesses, the managers that would be looking for technologies to support it, they have no idea about what that is. Like those 85% of the documents being created, management doesn't know what those are. So there is not a specific use case for it. But one thing that AI actually does, once you start having these tools where you can see where you, as a user, you interacted with this in a new way. So you're not looking for something that already has a structure or a tool for something. You're just putting in your intent. I need something that does this. That gives you a lot of information about the patterns that you might want to be optimizing for. So that junior consultant that you're throwing everything at the beginning, all of a sudden, when you start seeing some patterns, you might want to spin out more expertise. So it looks like a lot of people are doing pitch decks here. Why don't we do specific agents that are really good at doing pitch decks? And you get and that's the way where you level up from all of a sudden it's 30% completion to now 50% completion. And then you can start adding in more and more expertise as you get closer and closer to the use cases. So it's sort of a natural flywheel that helps you sort of graduate with AI to actually get to those benefits that sit underneath once you start understanding what the real problems actually are. And those comes from the intent of the users.
I've got to ask the question, are there any favorite use cases or situations where you've found this technology to be kind of a home run, that it's just, or to put simply, and this is kind of an opportunity for a bit of an advertorial, but where you're like, where you immediately think everyone should be doing this because it just gives, it frees up so much of your time, it gives you so much uplift. Are there a couple of use cases that just scream at you?
Yeah, well, I'll first argue that if you look at us or anyone else out there, it's just this. I think companies really need to look at document generation in general as something that should be solved with AI. I'll give you one example. Global accounting firm, very large, one of the biggest in the world, did an analysis on one document type, which is their proposals, and found out that they have every year $20 billion under management on these proposals. So they sit with that. So they're extremely reliant on how well they work. Now, with those, more than 100,000 people that they have employed, obviously not everyone is equally good at building them. So there's a lot of reliability that sits within this. So what this company has been doing is to identify the best practices, both on how to create those proposals, but also what they're grounded in, which proposals actually worked well to actually turn into business value on the other side. So it's a combination of reducing enormous amounts of time and cost going into building these, combining that, well, of course, with a big risk reduction as well of not having things that are wrong, so to speak. But the biggest impact is actually the revenue, the uptick on how many of those $20 billion proposals under management actually turning into revenue. On big numbers, that's probably the one, but you could extrapolate that into pretty much any repeatable use case that is going on in any business. And there you have it. Best practices, worst case is what you're optimizing for. And it's just been super difficult to get there before AI.
Last question before we wrap up. Increasingly, I'm hearing people now saying, the AI technology is not the thing that's going to give you the most benefit in business, that is competitively, because everyone will have AI technology. It's the data that you have, it's the proprietary data you have that you can rub up against the AI. That intersection is where the lift comes. But equally, people are quite concerned about utilizing external services because that data then leaks out and potentially can be reused by others. How do you respond to folks who want to get this benefit to be able to tap into their corporate data but are worried about it leaking into, frankly, informing their competitors?
Well, first of all, I completely agree. That's kind of the AI lives on the back of data, obviously. And even with the more specialized models, and by the way, what we've been seeing for many of these enterprises for a while now is how they've been building these brains that essentially consolidates all the knowledge and data that sits within the companies and then give them specific purposes where they get really good at certain things, which is fantastic because these new super brains then oftentimes needs arms and legs to actually go that last mile to do to get out to where they can actually benefit anyone. But that's where you can start plugging in. If you're a company like us, you can then start plugging into those brains that are super structured and are not open to the rest of the world and are really optimized for having all the knowledge that is relevant for that particular company with all the security that is required. And then you start plugging in these types of tools that can really sort of put them to life. That's kind of where the magic really happens. So what we're saying to these companies is that it's really good to start doing that. You need to build the brains. It's a prerequisite to get there. And you need to get to that trustable sort of starting point where the AI is strong enough, the models are strong enough, and they're trustable enough because the control sits there and also they're secure enough. A lot of companies have taken those massive steps for a while, and I think they're the ones that are winning. They have that as a prerequisite, but the ones that are really winning at the end of the day, also the ones that can then plug in these other things that, again, turns the standalone brains into full bodies with arms and legs that can go the extra mile.
You started the show by saying that your superpower is predicting the future, or at least whether or not your child's going to smash the glass on the ground. What's your take? What does your crystal ball tell you about business and AI over the coming couple of years? What's your take?
I think the world will get into a place where it becomes very clear that there is a ton of ROI to be had. For sure, there will be a lot of the sort of the wrong projects like we discussed in the beginning that's going to be wiped off the table because it will need to be more purposeful, and you would need to have better models to actually be able to deliver. So there's a lot of things that need to work together to get this right. But I'm absolutely confident that it will happen and that it's already happening. And we can see the advantages that the businesses that have invested earliest are starting to see now compared to their competitors, just on the little corner that we're in, how that really comes together. And you can just be tremendously much more, not only productive, but also, I would say, effectful and turn AI into revenue as well. So I'm absolutely confident that's just, after this kind of, this is new and shiny and everybody's impressed, to then be a little bit unimpressed, to then figure out what to actually use it for. I think we're going to see the same as also in other big shifts in technology, that it's coming together and it's happening for sure.
If people are interested in learning more about document creation workflow, AI augmented document creation workflow, where can they go to learn more?
Well, a lot of places, but I would welcome them to come to templafy.com for sure. And listening to all the stuff that we're doing. We're doing tons of webinars and content and stuff, and try to help the people understand more about what this means.
Well, hey, Christian, thank you so much, Tuck, for coming on the show today, and forward to getting you back at some time.
So, Tuck, thanks so much for having me.
All right, well, that's a wrap, folks. Is document creation and workflow the low-hanging fruit for your enterprise when it comes to AI. Would love to know what your thoughts are. Drop your ideas, your comments into the comment section below on the podcast, or you can hit us up on LinkedIn using the handle @Cloudera. Would love to hear from you. As always, great array of guests coming up. So if you like what you heard today, make sure to like, share, and subscribe so you and your colleagues don't miss a drop. Thanks again to Cloudera for hosting another episode of the AI Forecast, and thank you all for listening in. We'll see you all next week.